It's 1991. Birds and people are living together in seemingly perfect harmony until one day a young man catches fire. This is Phoenix.
All right. How's everybody doing on this happy Thanksgiving Day or happy Fall Festival Day if you do not celebrate Thanksgiving days? I hope that you guys had a very awesome, full of every food you could ever imagine. And if you didn't, or you weren't around loved ones, well, thank you for signing in because you're among friends right now. My name is 12 Gauge, and this is my show, 12 Gauge Investigative. And first of all, I'd like to say hello. There's a couple people in the chat. Rondi Potter and Aquarius. Aquarius says, "Hey guys, I've been a lurker." Oh, so you've been lurking, huh? I haven't really been on YouTube today. Actually, I after I ate, we ate at around noon, and after I ate, boy, it just took me out. So I thought I'd get on here and kind of say hello to everybody. I hope everybody's doing okay, and I hope that you gave a little bit of thanks to um, whatever it is that you're thankful for, or even have any kind of gratitude for. Can be the purge. So 12 is the centerpiece. Very funny. Very funny, very funny. Um, but anyways, I thought I'd get on here and I'd read some more of this book that I started reading this morning at 1 in the morning. And if you guys haven't heard about this book, I did a live this morning and I read probably about a couple chapters, and it was given the diagrams of different types of individuals that could be oftentimes viewed as killers and it kind of breaks down the levels in which this doctor identified 22 different variations of placing killers, murderers, rapists, people that kill themselves, people that kill for jealousy. I mean, it's hard to really put everything all into words, but I hope that you guys do go back and read some of that. And I'm going to get started with this and continue on. Y'all like the shades? It says rise and grind. Anyways, somebody was telling me that with the shades, I have the same hairdo as The Rock back in his day, and I would just start laughing. Um, are they serving chilled at Investigation Brain? Oh, well, let's see. Let's go ahead and pick up where I left off. I was talking about Charles Manson and the way that him and his crew were identified, and I stopped at category 3. So I'm going to pick up a category 4. This book is very scientific and it's very lengthy with its explanation. So if that's not your thing, um, you might not enjoy it, but I hope you do. There was 13 people that were loving it um, this morning at 1 in the morning. So hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. It says similar to category 1, category 4 is associated with individuals who kill in self defense. However, they are not generally exonerated when legally tried due to the critical difference that here the threat in which self defense efforts are carried out is the result of what is demonstrated to be extreme provocation on the attacked person's own part. Consider the following example. On August 9, 2010, 31-year-old Jose Rodriguez Elizondo, an off duty U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer, visited the Punto 3 nightclub in Texas with his wife and brother. His wife alleged that while they were being ejected from the club following a disagreement, she was pushed by bouncer Furman Limon Jr., who was the son of the establishment's owner. Elizondo and Limon began arguing, and several security guards came over to assist. Elizondo broke free and ran nearly 70 yards to his truck, where his CBP issued firearm and badge were located. He had his gun in hand as the men banged on the windows and forced him out the vehicle. When Limon grabbed him, Elizondo began to pistol whip him. He was suddenly approached by 49-year-old Limon Sr., who was holding a 9mm pistol. Elizondo claimed that he told the elder Limon to put down his weapon at least twice before feeling compelled to shoot him in self-defense. Bar security saw it differently, reporting that Elizondo fired instantly as Limon was trying to calm the escalating situation. Following shots to his leg and chest, Limon Sr. hid behind the vehicle while a bouncer who had taken over the pistol fired several shots at Elizondo. The club owner later died as a result of his injuries. The following year, Elizondo, who it was felt provided and did not abandon the encounter, was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Later, the defense appealed, and Elizondo was granted a new trial due to an error related to the charge. He pled guilty and accepted a sentence of 5 years, of which he had already served a substantial portion. So, this is telling you about self defense and the differences of what people might think that it really is. Um, you know, many times individuals think that if somebody breaks into your home or anything like that, you're able to just kill them. Well, stand your ground states have different things going on. So you have to initially have them shoot at you or come towards you before you're able to stand your ground. Like here in Texas, if somebody breaks into your home, they have to cross the threshold before you're able to shoot them or, dis- dismantle what kind of threat that is coming your way. So, and another misconception is if somebody comes into your home and you have a weapon and, they turn around to run off and you shoot them in the back, then all of a sudden that's murder. It's no longer self defense. So, this is an interesting thing that we're talking about here. We would also categorize here the case of Susan Cummings, one of the two internal twin sisters born in Monaco in 1962 to a billionaire arms dealer and his Swiss wife, Samuel and Irma Cummings. In 1984, the twins' father purchased for them a lavish estate in Warrenton, Virginia, named Ashland Farms, complete with a stone and frame manor house, two cottages, 22 horse stalls, and a 200-foot indoor riding arena. In 1995, Susan Cummings began dating Roberto Villegas, a dashing Argentine polo player. He had recently left a long-term relationship with a Floridian woman who was pregnant with their son. Shortly after the child's birth, Villegas began spending the summers in Virginia to ride the polo circuit, where he was hired by Cummings as an instructor. Before long, he moved into the estate, and by the following year, their dynamic had become a stormy one. He was reportedly ill tempered and verbally aggressive, and Cummings grew increasingly detached. Her alleged frugality, despite immense wealth, was a further point of contention. Villegas was not paid for his work and came to greatly resent his financial dependency upon her. Rumors swirled that he was engaging in affairs with other women. Their relationship ultimately became explosive, and on September 7th, 1997, Cummings fatally shot him 4 times and with a Walter 9mm semi-automatic, one of the guns imported by her father as he sat eating breakfast at their kitchen table. Following her confession to the police, she was arrested and charged with homicide. She claimed that Villegas had become physically abusive, grabbing her by the throat and slowly cutting her arm with a knife, saying he was going to teach her a lesson. She explained that she begged him to stop and suggested they have some coffee and talk. When she went over to the sink, she heard his chair move and believed him to be coming toward her. Thinking quickly, she grabbed the gun she kept in a nearby cabinet and repeatedly fired at him. An attorney defending Cummings noted that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had filed a statement with local deputies in which she called him overpowering, short fused, and the crazy type. She described how he refused to follow her, or how he refused to allow her to leave him, and that in the prior month he had begun to show signs of aggression, allegedly telling her, I will put a bullet in your head and hang you upside down to let the blood pour on your bed. A 1987 battery charge against him was also noted. Villegas was also quoted as once saying, I treat my women and my horses the same way. If I can't break them, I kill them. Prosecutors, by contrast, positioned that the killing was premeditated and that Cummings had cut her self before staging a self defense scenario. In the end, despite being convicted of voluntary manslaughter, she was sentenced to only 60 days in jail and a $2,500 fine. In this case, we do not encounter a situation in which one inoffensive person is maltreated by someone else in a totally one sided manner, as observed in Category 1. This case involved two individuals in a tense negative dynamic to which they both contributed to some degree, and it flared up into an incident in which one party then felt the need to defend themselves against threat of bodily harm or even death. Hence, we feel that Category 4 is the most appropriate ranking for the slaying of Velagas on the gradations of evil scale. Category 5. Individuals in Category 5 who show no signs of psychopathy feel driven to homicide by traumatic or desperate circumstances, followed by bona fide guilt and remorse. These killings are generally impulsive, without much deliberation. The victims are typically family members or significant others, but other people perceived as contributing to the individual's negative circumstances might instead be targeted. Looking over a variety of cases classified here, we note that the emotions involved are more often than not about a sense of weakness or helplessness arising due to the convergence of two forces. First, there's some external problem, such as aggression or maltreatment by a spouse or a partner, financial difficulties, or some other adverse condition in the home. So take that to mind. And then the second, there's an internal psychological factor, such as intense anxiety, trauma related to prior abuse, or profound depression, sometimes with transient psychotic thinking. The individual consequently feels hopeless, lost, and driven over the proverbial edge before a period of returning to his or her baseline level of functioning. We also note that these homicides can sometimes be especially violent in intensity, as if the individual was focused, long pent up hurt, resentment, and frustration into one explosive emotional expression. You know, excuse me. Another thing that people fail to understand is, there are different variations of why people kill. Many times, as I was telling somebody the other day, not only do we jumble up emotional words all into one, we categorize them as if, okay, this person did that. Well, they must have been a murderer because their childhood was bad. I think what people forget is, you know, it's not always about having a bad childhood. It's not always about, being picked on. It's not always about these different variations. But basically, you could become a killer just out of wanting revenge for the way people treat you, for the way that people, for the way you perceive certain individuals in your life. Like, you could have a harbored, unconscious trigger toward people that have more money than you, are more prestigious than you. They date women that are more affluent. They have a life that you feel in your grandiose state that you should have. So if you become fixated with one person in that, let's say, culture, then that could take you into your frenzy of urge to act out, to make everything equal in your mind, which means that it's no longer about personal choice. It's no longer about the understanding that this person had it bad or had it good or this or that and the other, but merely they just wanted to even the playing fields. And you're right, PKC. Some are just born that way. You're right. So let me read some more. I lost my place. The individual consequently feels hopeless, lost, and driven over the proverbial edge before a period of returning to his or her baseline level or functioning. We also note that these homicides can sometimes be especially violent in intensity, as if the individual has focused long pent up hurt, resentment, and frustration into one explosive emotional expression. We see these elements in the case of Diane Clark of England, who, at the age of 42, has suffered the final straw in an abusive marriage, brutally stabbing her 46-year-old husband, Graham Clark, to death. Mr. Clark, who was a heavy gambler and drinker, had a history of convictions for criminal behavior dating back to adolescence. The two were married in 1974 after a courtship of only 2 months, and almost immediately Mrs. Clark found herself subjected to her husband's violent outbursts, especially when he was intoxicated. Within 3 years, drawn, she had grown drawn, thin, and anxious. Mr. Clark hardly worked, forcing her to be the sole breadwinner for the 5 children, for whose sake she felt obliged to remain with her husband. He beat her so she had to wear long sleeve jumpers all year long to conceal bruises, and he forced her to engage in sex, first when drunk and eventually even when sober. Mr. Clark falsely accused her of extramarital affairs and once flew into a rage when she said she wished to consult a physician who simply happened to be a male. In September 1997, Mr. Clark demanded that his wife leave their home, and she sought refuge in a hotel where she worked as a waitress. Making her mind up to tell her husband that she wished to leave the marriage, Mrs. Clark came home to find the house vandalized with paint and her husband in an alcohol fueled rage. He suddenly punched her in the face, tore buttons from her blouse, and shredded a bouquet of roses he had brought home as a peace offering. Mr. Clark demanded that she leave again, and as he searched around for a suitcase, she grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed him 4 times in the back and left shoulder. He expired in their hallway. Miss Clark, who was arrested, told authorities that she simply could not take any more of her husband's maltreatment. At her trial, it was made clear that Miss Clark, who felt authentic contrition for what she had done, had no indications of a psychopathic personality. The judge spoke of a smoking fuse of provocation that led her to act in a way totally out of character. Following her guilty plea to manslaughter, she was set free and returned to her children to begin her life anew. A second example, also from England, is the case of 59-year-old former plumber Dennis Long, who killed his 62-year-old longtime romantic partner, Judith Scott. According to Long, he was routinely both emotionally and physically abused by Scott throughout their 3 decades together, during which they raised 2 daughters she had from a prior relationship. She also had four grandchildren. Scott ridiculed and shamed Long, repeatedly beat him with a poker, and once left him with a broken thumb. On occasion, he would walk away from the relationship, only to return shortly thereafter. In March of 2010, Long was assaulted by a local bully as he and Scott made their way home from a pub. And in addition to not defending himself, he refused to inform the police. Enraged, Scott mocked him for lacking backbone, said she should wear the trousers and he a dress, and called him a pussy. I mean, a pansy. And a poof, whatever that is. With that, Long explained he snapped. After taking up a knife, he fatally stabbed her in the arm and twice in the chest. He immediately called emergency services and told the dispatcher, I just lost it. She gave me grief, so I knifed her. He was subsequently arrested and tried for murder. Long was ultimately cleared of the charge on the ground of cumulative provocation over the course of years, but convicted of manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months in prison for the killing. It should be emphasized that as his trial progressed, there were no indications of psychopathy across his lifetime. He was described as a kind, hardworking person, a previously good character who abhorred violence, avoiding even swear words. The judge described him as a placid, unassertive, rather weak man, and he was found to be filled with bona fide remorse about the killing of Scott. So, what do y'all think about what I'm talking about so far? Well, that's definitely your choice, Miranda, but you know, I can't change any of it, so you're more than welcome to stay or you're more than welcome to leave. But we don't have a lot of issues in my chat, so it's up to you what you want to do. But if you cause a problem in here, you will be timed out and then ultimately blocked. So I'm just letting you know that's how we roll in here because I've never seen your name before. And everybody does have their opinion about certain people. You don't have to like certain people. And you don't have to necessarily agree with people. But as a guest in my panel or my channel, please be respectful and you can stay. And that's all I'm saying about that. Okay? Thank you for being here. Category 6 is a designation for a hot headed individual who commits homicide in an entirely impetuous manner. There's no self defense involved. Because the person's temperament is an aggressive one, it is possible for there to be a prior history of violent behavior or even criminal acts. However, these temper related incidents would not be of the type associated with an underlying psychopathic personality. The spur of the moment, totally unplanned crimes assigned to this category can be set off by essentially any overpowering emotion or existence. For instance, some severe humiliation. If the trigger is jealousy, the violent act is so unusually extreme that a ranking category 2 is insufficient. It is noteworthy that the violence associated with this ranking can extend to the killing of multiple individuals at one time. Thus, it is technically possible for an individual categorized here to have committed mass murder. Until recently, this was described by the FBI as four or more victims slain in one event in one location. But as a result of a federal statute, the definition changed to three or more killings in a single event. In 2012, either criterion would categorize Corey Wayne Elvis Westbrook, whose case we will now discuss, as a mass murderer. So this is the difference between what we just talked about and a mass murderer. So here we go with this one. On November 13th, 1997, Houston area police responded to numerous reports from the same apartment complex of what sounded like 5 gunshots fired during a span of about 40 seconds. There were also descriptions of a man standing near his pickup truck in the parking lot saying things like, "I did it, and I did what I had to do." Their authorities found Westbrook, 39 years of age at the time, and on the ground nearby the body of a 41-year-old Anthony Rogers. Westbrook explained that he had just killed his ex wife, 32-year-old Gloria Coons. The two had been married for a year before divorcing in 1996 due to the rockiness of the relationship. Thereafter, they continued to see one another and even lived together for a time. He moved out of their shared apartment about 3 months prior to the current incident. In the living room of one of the apartments, deputies found the bodies of 35-year-old Antonio Cruz and 43-year-old Ruth Money. A third person, 32-year-old Kelly Haslip, was on the floor and still alive. In the bedroom, they found his ex wife also living. All had been shot once at close range and in the head, chest, or abdomen. Kuhn died shortly after the arrival of the emergency workers, and Haslip expired 5 days later. According to Westbrook, he and Coons had lunch the night before the shooting, during which he expressed interest in possible reconciliation. Still in love with his ex wife, he was elated by the development. He went to her apartment that evening, finding her with her roommate, Money, as well as two men, Rogers and Haslip. They all appeared to have been drinking heavily. He was uncomfortable with the situation but agreed to join the group. Cruz appeared a short while later. Westbrook had several beers and felt buzzed. Then, when Coon suddenly flashed her breast to all present, Westbrook felt humiliated. She proceeded to escort Haslip into her bedroom, and the two were joined by Rogers several minutes later. Westbrook would later report that when Rogers emerged with his pants open, Coons announced that she had just performed oral sex on him and was about to have intercourse with Haslip. Westbrook's account continued that feeling distraught and crestfallen, he got up to leave but was followed outside by Cruz, who grabbed the keys to Westbrook's truck to prevent his departure. Grabbing a 36 caliber hunting rifle from his truck, he followed Cruz back into the apartment with the goal of retrieving his keys, which were indeed later found in the pocket of Cruz's pants. Once inside, all hell broke loose. The group began to verbally harass, threaten, and physically assault him. Money hurled a beer at him, reportedly causing the rifle to discharge, killing her instantly. When Cruz and Rogers rushed toward him, he fired at both. Then, walking into the room where Coons and Haslip were having sex, he shot them both. Blinded with rage, he then walked outside and patiently waited for the police. Rogers apparently managed to exit his apartment building and expired in the parking lot. At his trial, Westbrook explained that he had no intention of killing anyone that night, but he had lost it. A psychologist for the defense described him as having been very much at the end of his rope. At the time of the murders, it emerged that not long before the shootings, he learned that his 9-year-old daughter with a previous wife had allegedly been sexually molested. There was also some questions of whether he was intellectually disabled. Westbrook did not have a criminal record. However, the state alleged a history of acts in the context of hot-headedness that had never been reported to police, including threatening to burn down the home of his first wife, attempting to torch the home of his ex-landlords following an eviction, and intimidating Coons and her friends on another occasion. In 1998, Westbrook was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. He expressed deep remorse, stating, "I've regretted everything a trillion times. If I could bring these people back to life, I would." He was nevertheless executed for his rampage by lethal injection in 2016. That's interesting to me that this individual handled it like this because I've sat across the table or desk from a situation that was just like this. This individual told me that his wife was cheating on him, and he learned about it, and then came in one day and caught her and the guy that she was cheating with. He went to his truck, grabbed a pistol, and shot them both. But he said his wife still lived because he didn't really shoot to kill her, but he killed the guy. And once she started to run for help, he got in his truck and ran her down. And all he would talk about whenever we had our individual sessions is how much he loved her. And he was in a state of, I guess, substance abuse psychosis. He had cocaine, he had alcohol, he had, all kinds of chemicals inside of him. So he wasn't in his right mind, you know? And it was sad that that this happened to him, you know? It was sad that it happened to him and it happened to his wife. And people say, well, how can you have empathy on people that kill another person? How can you have empathy on somebody like that? Well, due to my job, I'm objective in the fact that I listen to people and I work on understanding and trying to get them to understand that chemicals change not only the way they feel, but the way that they react when their emotions are mixed with the chemicals. Do you believe him? Well, anybody that sat on the other side of my desk, I had to be objective. So therefore, it was neither here nor against. It was just I was listening to his side of the story. Seeing exactly whether I could help him understand that his history with drugs or alcohol was causing a lot of his problems in his life, but he never seemed to see that. He'd always go back to chemicals whenever life was getting too hard or life was getting too uncontrollable. He would always go back to drinking or drugging. But um he did have a new girlfriend at that point, a new wife, and he didn't repeat the same behaviors. He did go to prison and he eventually made parole, but it was seen that he did this in a moment of insanity due to the fact that he caught his loved ones being intimate with another person. So therefore, his defense was he lost it. He lost it. And he wanted to take care of it, so to speak, because it was more than he could handle. And I know a lot of people they can't fathom that type of mindset. And it's like everything else. Unless you've ever been there, unless you know somebody who's actively been there and they're close to you, you can say you could understand it, but you really don't. There's no emotional attachment. So therefore, when somebody says, "Well, I killed him out of anger, or I killed him out of spite," In your mind, you're thinking, well, there's no reason that somebody should ever get that way and ever hurt another person. But it's a possibility that that does happen. And people, good people do kill, bad people do kill as well. So that was just a quick interlude on that situation because I've had, more than one client actually be in that position. Chapter 3, category 7 and 8. I wonder if the course of narcissism through the ages would have been any different had narcissists first peered into a cesspool. He probably did. Frank O'Hara, Early Writing, 1977. Category 7 and 8 of the gradations of evil scale shift us away from unplanned, impetuous aggression related to self defense, jealousy, rage, or adverse circumstances. Here we first encounter individuals whose basic underlying personality structures, not merely proclivities to be hot headed or impulsive, partially set the stage for murder or other acts of extreme violence. As we shall see, there are key distinctions between the types of individuals assigned to category 7 and 8. However, both have, good grief, both involve persons who, after a period of chronically feeling overlooked or slighted and possibly nursing long term grudges, feel driven to violence. So these individuals are persons who, after a period of chronically feeling overlooked or slighted and possibly nursing long term grudges, feel driven to violence. That's all it takes for these people to kill. So for individuals to sit there and say, no, that can't be possible, that's not enough for them to kill people. I ask of you, well, what is? In the penitentiary, people kill over less. You sit in someone's chair and you don't want to get up and you're going to fight about it. If that individual feels strong about it, he could kill you over that chair, even though it's neither one of you. But that's where he sits every day. You get what I'm saying? But we have individuals that don't want to take it to that extreme because emotionally they can't handle it. Emotionally, they can't handle the thought that it could potentially be somebody that could kill somebody that easily. The killing is generally more severe in nature than would be associated with the earlier categories, and critically, there is some scheming and planning involved. Furthermore, while some aberrant personality traits are present, those individuals do not exhibit full blown psychopathy. So they're not in a psychotic state when they're doing this. They just have to have that chronic feeling of being overlooked. Like, okay, you're good, but I'm going to choose this person. Chronic means onset is very quick and comes on fast. Or no, that's acute. Chronic is over time. That feeling continues to mount. I'm sorry. Possibly nurturing a long term grudge. Let's say you had a grudge against somebody and you've just had enough. You've just had enough because that continues to fester in your mind and you feel violent. You feel driven to violence. Well, I'm going to take care of it once and for all. Furthermore, while some arrogant personality traits are present, these individuals do not exhibit full blown psychopathy. Category 7. Individuals ranked here are driven to kill by intense degrees of narcissism. That is to say, grandiosity, extreme self centeredness, and a constant craving for the admiration of other people. So there's a lot of grandiose people in the world today. There's a lot of self centered people, and there's some people that are constantly craving for the admiration of other people. You see it on these YouTube streets. And you say, well, they're not all killers. The operative word is yet. And I want you to think about this in every situation in life. The word yet, Y-E-T, we are all just one situation away from lighting that fuse. We're all one situation from reacting to a situation that's festered in our mind for years. All of us. None of us are perfect from this because we are designed not to die. So we're confronted with somebody who's trying to kill us. We're designed to fight back unless it's an ambush and we can't see it, we can't hear it, we can't overcome it. Such needs can sometimes lead these types to become caught up in grandiose ideas that are partially or even fully delusional, such as thoughts of having a special bond with a celebrated person or god, or being the center of other people's attention. They're also sometimes capable of killing or acting out aggressively for no reason, other than the satisfaction of their own egotistical needs. So, as I'm reading this, I want you to really be paying attention to the words that I'm saying because it's diagramming certain killers to you in these categories because that's what this book is about. It's about categorizing different types of killers. And these types of people, they have a special bond with a celebrated person or someone that they put on a pedestal as a god or being the center of other people's attention. So you don't like that person? Well, they continue to bug you. Well, let me take care of that. And they're also sometimes capable of killing or acting out aggressively for no reason other than the satisfaction of their own egotistical needs. So many times we hear over and over and over in certain cases, well, what happened? We want to know what happened. We want to know what drove this person to do this. Was it this? Was it that? Was it this? There's no way it could have been that. There's no way it could have been this. I just read to you a very simplistic definition of how it could have been. But in our minds, we want to dramatize everything. Excuse me. We want it to be substantiated where we can see people parachuting into the windows and shooting everybody in the bedroom or everybody in the house, room by room. We want it to be it was because they were a bad person that they got killed, not just because they were a person at the wrong place at the wrong time of someone's sadistic mindset. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, why don't y'all go play trivia over there if that's what y'all want to do? Fire it up, Kane. For instance, the objective may be to gain notoriety or, in some cases, the staging of a victimization situation in order to draw the sympathies of other people. Just land them to a quasi psychotic quality. When individuals ranked in this category kill in context of intense jealousy, it is generally due to the wounded pride and resentment associated with feeling less desirable than someone else. Let us consider the following widely publicated case. In October of 1980, a 25-year-old Mark David Chapman purchased a 38 caliber revolver, leaving his wife in their Hawaii home to travel to New York City. His aim was to kill the singer and songwriter John Lennon, whose 1966 remark that his band, the Beatles, were more popular than Jesus, offended Chapman's Christian sensibilities. Additionally, over the past 2 years, the disturbed loner had become fixated upon J.D. Salinger's 1951 novel, The Catcher in the Rye, in which an angst ridden teenager tackles feelings of alienation, existential confusion, and the loss of childhood innocence. Lennon had begun to seem to him like one of the phonies bemoaned in the book, the type who spouts platitudes about simplicity and fairness but lives a lavish lifestyle while other people struggle and starve. Chapman's identification with the novel's young protagonist, Holden Caulfield, had grown so intense that he tried to legally adopt the character's name as his own. So you see, it doesn't take much. Doesn't take much at all. So this person just took one statement that this individual made and instantly started building a portfolio for revenge. And you ask, well, that guy's crazy, right? No, this individual was seeing this as a attack of his fundamental values and beliefs, and nobody could have told him any different. And those of you that know what happened to John Lennon, we're about to see he was gunned down for no other reason than this statement that he made that this individual was reading a novel in which he became fixated on a character and he wanted to act out as the character was in that book and to avenge his Christian beliefs and morals upon John Lennon. On December 7th, 1980, Chapman spent several hours staking out the Dakota, the fabled Manhattan apartment building where Lennon, the singer's wife, Yoko Ono, and their 5-year-old son, Sean, resided. When his target failed to appear, Chapman mimicked the actions of his beloved Holden in Salinger's book by heading back to his hotel and contacting an escort service, paying his female companion $190 to merely listen to him as he spoke. The following day, he opened up the Bible to the Gospel of John and wrote the surname Lennon after the name of the evangelist. Resolving to kill the star, he headed back to the Dakota, picking up fresh copies of the Bible and The Catcher in the Rye on his way. In the latter, he wrote to Holden Caulfield, this is my statement, Holden Caulfield. Later that day, Chapman met Lennon's housekeeper and young Sean on the street. Around 5 in the evening, Lennon and Ono left the Dakota for a recording session. And as they made their way to their limousine, Chapman shook Lennon's hand and acquired his autograph on a record sleeve. When the couple returned nearly 6 hours later, Chapman was still there. Waiting until they had turned away from him, he shot Lennon 4 times in the back and the shoulder. When police arrived at the scene, they found Chapman reading The Catcher in the Rye. Lennon was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, and the world, plunged into the mourning, struggled to fathom what type of man could wish to silence such a beloved musical icon. The killer was born in May of 1955 in Fort Worth, Texas. His reportedly unemotional but occasionally volatile father was a U.S. Air Force staff sergeant, alleged to have been abusive toward Chapman's mother. The latter, described as dreamish and moody, worked as a nurse. He had one younger sister. His family lived for a period in Purdue, Indiana, before settling in Decatur, Georgia, where Chapman had a few meaningful friendships. When Chapman was 11, his IQ was found to be in the superior range. An intellectually curious, active adolescent, he worked in a library, collected coins, started a local newspaper, and earned money by washing bicycles. He enjoyed burying time capsules and sent up helium balloons containing messages he hoped would reach distant places. Chapman also became an avid Beatles fan in his youth, charging friends a fee to watch him perform a lip sync version of She Loves You. His father taught him how to play the guitar. From childhood through early adolescence, Chapman had a tendency to shake and rock his body, sometimes resulting to head injuries. Starting in the third or fourth grade, when he experienced some bullying at school surrounding his poor athletic abilities, he retreated into a vivid fantasy world in which he was not a misfit, but a figure of great admiration. Here we go. So he started to get bullied. So what did he do instead of lashing out? He starts fantasizing about a world where he is a figure of great admiration, where he is in control. Nobody is controlling him, nobody is hurting him. He is in control of the outcome. He would later say that he fantasized of being the king of a world of little people whom he imagined lived in the walls of his home. He explained, I was their hero and was in the paper every day, and I was on TV, their TV, and that I was important. By age 14, Chapman was sniffing glue and lighter fluid and abusing marijuana, cocaine, and heroin. He began skipping school and stopped bathing, adopting an anti parent, anti everything stance. He once ran away from home to live on the streets of Miami for 2 weeks. He spent one night in jail during the LSD trip. In 1971, Chapman joined a Christian group geared toward healing drug addiction, and he began disseminating tracts wearing a large cross around his neck and proselytizing to friends. At 17, he was once again a diligent student and found work as a camp counselor for the YMCA. Seeking to restore his sullied innocence, a theme that he would find echoed in The Catcher in the Rye, he refused to play the Beatles anymore, considering Lennon's statement regarding the fame of the band blasphemous. In 1975, Chapman worked overseas in Beirut and then in an Arkansas resettlement camp for refugees from Vietnam. There he met and began dating Jessica Blankenship, and the couple became involved with a charismatic Christian group that performed exorcism rituals and spiritual healing. So, do you see the buildup here? Do you see where he went through the phases? Where he would just pack you jewel. How you doing? It's interesting that you come into the chat. We're not talking about that person, so I appreciate your comment. You're welcome to stay. Just like I tell other people, we agree to disagree, but we're not talking about that case. So, if you want to talk about that case, I suggest you go somewhere else to find somebody who's talking about it. I'm talking about just generalized information about how people become who they become, such as killing people. And, you know, that statement in itself goes against what I believe in this channel. So maybe you should go somewhere else. Thank you for being here, though. Unless you want to learn about this stuff, then you're more than welcome to stay. Because the more you learn about things, sometimes it can change your perception of what your belief is. You know, sometimes we get brainwashed from people's thoughts and beliefs when we don't want to research our own stuff. You know what I mean? I'm not running you off. I'm just telling you that we're not discussing that case in here, not until the trial. So I might bring up variations, but that doesn't mean that I'm talking about that person. There's been countless people that at certain levels of their lives became obsessed and even festered and killed. And that's what this book is talking about. So appreciate you being here. I've seen you in other chats. So thank you for being here. You don't have to leave, but please don't type about that case because we're not talking about it, okay? If you have any questions, feel free to ask. At this time, Blankenship began noticing a particular division in Chapman's personality. Part of the time, he was morally rigid, refusing to be flirtatious, play the guitar, or consume junk food. Elsewhere, he enjoyed performing music, drank, and lost his virginity with a coworker behind Blankenship's back. He depicted these as a battle between his flesh and his spirit, which gave rise to intense feelings of guilt. Then, after he enrolled in a conservative Presbyterian college in Tennessee, he became preoccupied with thoughts about death and suicide, cried after making any sort of physical contact with Blankenship, and described a fantasy about having sex with a prostitute while his girlfriend looked on. He took a job as a security guard, which led to firearm training. Eventually, he outfitted his car with a spotlight, some tear gas, a club, and a gun. By this point, Chapman had become so on edge that even a minor provocation could set off explosive angers. Profound despair overtook him, and he made up his mind to commit suicide in Hawaii, relocating there in 1977. He phoned the suicide hotline and entered psychotherapy, but not long after, he drove to a deserted area and used a vacuum cleaner hose attached to his car's exhaust pipe to try to end his life by carbon monoxide inhalation. A fisherman found him before he succeeded, and furthermore, the exhaust had burned through the hose, all of which he interpreted as sign of God's will. He was treated in the hospital and following discharge, took up a job there. Around this same time, his parents divorced and his mother came to join him in Hawaii. In 1978, Chapman took a 6-week trip around the world, entering into a relationship with his travel agent, Gloria Abe. They married the following year. In the course of the hospital work, he was isolated and argumentative and began to drink heavily. It was then that he became fixated on Salinger's novel and the idea of killing a celebrity. John Lennon was only one name on his list of possible victims, which also included Elizabeth Taylor and TV host Johnny Carson, among others. At Chapman's murder trial in 1981, back and forth between the defense and prosecution surrounding his mental state at the time of the killing came to a halt when he entered a guilty plea. Although he framed his desire to kill in spiritual terms, there was an indication that he believed that murder, especially of an eminent person, would make him somebody. So here we go into, if I kill this famous person, this will ultimately propel me to famous status, which some of the murderers that you know about, they go into that stratosphere because instantly they're famous. Everybody knows about them, but they're famous for all the wrong reasons. Indeed, when an assassin kills a celebrated individual, the two become permanently conjoined in history, such that it becomes impossible to tell the story one without making a mention of the other. Chapman received a sentence of 20 years to life. When later asked by a parole board what motivated him to kill the beloved Beatle, he replied, "Attention, bottom line." Here laid bare, we find the narcissistic brand of motive underlying murders categorized at level 7 of the gradations of evil scale. We encounter a disturbing second example of attention seeking at the high cost of homicide in the case of Mary Beth Tinning, born Mary Beth Rowe in Duansburg, New York in 1942. Little is known about her early childhood. Beyond that, she had one younger brother and that her mother worked while her father fought overseas in the Second World War. This resulted in her being placed in the care of various relatives, one of whom callously informed her that she was an accidental, unwanted child. This led her to feel that her parents were happier about her brother's birth than her own. When her father returned from duty, taking up work as a press operator, he repeatedly beat Tinning, smacked her with a fly swatter, and locked her in a closet. Tinning was an average student and considered plain, temperamental, and attention starved by her schoolmates who shunned her en masse, such that a former teacher would remember that her as almost a non entity. In an effort to gain other people's interest, she took to concocting outlandish stories. Tinning graduated from high school in 1961 and worked various odd jobs until she found steadier work as a nursing assistant at a Schenectady hospital. She married Joe Tinning, a man in the same field as her father. In 1971, her father died, never having supplied the attentiveness and loving concern she long desired. She found his passing emotionally overwhelming. The Tinnings would have 13 children between 1972 and 1985, but 9 would tragically die in infancy or early childhood, beginning with her daughter Jennifer, who succumbed to acute meningitis at just 8 days old. 3 weeks later, 2-year-old Joseph Jr. died of an unconfirmed virus and a seizure disorder. Then, after 6 more weeks, 4-year-old Barbara died of what was believed to be cardiac arrest. 2-week Timothy died of a sudden infant death syndrome in 1973. 5-month-old Nathan of pulmonary edema in 1975. 2.5-year-old Mary of SIDS in 1979. 3-month-old Jonathan of undetermined causes in 1980. And 3-year-old Michael of bronchial pneumonia in 1981. In December 1985, the Tinning's 3-month-old Tammy Lynn was found unconscious in her bed, which was covered with blood. The child's death was attributed to SIDS, but police caught on. Miss Tinning ultimately confessed to smothering the baby with a pillow and was suspected of 7 other infanticides. She was believed by some to display symptoms of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychiatric condition in which someone caring for a child or elderly or disabled person intentionally harms his or her charge as a means of gaining sympathy and personal attention. So, if whoever I'm taking care of, or whoever, I have this many kids, if they ultimately die, then people are gonna have sympathy for me, which seems like that's what she was doing. It emerged that Miss Tinning would prep herself and soak up the condolences at her children's funerals, playing up the role of a mother repeatedly bearing intense grief, and it was suggested that the focus upon her following the natural death of her first child in 1972, arguably the only meaningful attention she ever received, became something of an addiction for her. In 1987, Miss Tinning was convicted of second-degree murder for depraved indifference to human life, in the murder of Tammy Lynn, and sentenced to 20 years to life. She was released on parole in 2018 at the age of 75, long unable to bear any additional children. It is worth noting that if she did indeed commit at least 2 homicides in separate events, Tinning would be the first murderer we have thus far described who meet the previously mentioned FBI criteria for a serial murder. As we shall discuss later in this volume, mothers who commit repeat infanticide constitute a subcategory of serial killing that is not necessarily associated with a marked degree of psychopathy or sadism, and such cases can sometimes be ranked at the lower end of the gradations of evil scale. We conclude our description of Category 7 with the truly disturbing case of Armin Muse of Rotenburg, Germany. Born in Kassel in December 1961, he was considered an average child prior to age 8, enjoying the picturesque vistas of his Hessian hometown on the Fluida River and playing with animals. This happier time was shattered when his father, described as stern and detached, abandoned his overbearing, thrice married mother. In short order, one of his brothers became a priest and another permanently moved away. His mother made him perform grueling chores, forced him to wear traditional lederhosen to school, which made him the butt of constant jokes, insisted upon accompanying him everywhere and admonished him publicly, sometimes calling him worthless. Gradually slipping into a world of pure fantasy, Muse created an imaginary brother named Frankie, whom he envisioned as a very good listener, and became fixated on the story of Hansel and Gretel, especially the part in which the cannibalistic witch fattens up Hansel to eat him. Telling Frankie that he is becoming increasingly fascinated by the subject of devouring a human being, he tore apart a Barbie doll and cooked the plastic parts on a grill. He also read heavily about infamous serial killer Fritz Herrmann, dubbed the Vampire of Hanover, who butchered his young male victims and consumed their blood. At 12, Muse began fantasizing about eating his friends so that they could become a permanent part of himself and never abandon him. A strange symbolic solution for a lonely boy who had suffered the loss of a majority of his family. In adulthood, Muse worked as a computer engineer and served in the military. So you see, some of these people, they live normal lives. They just have intense fantasies or delusions about what they want to do to people. He was engaged to a woman for 9 months, whom he ultimately found just as unbearable as his mother. It was like going from the shower to the storm, he would later say. He would also admit that he did not feel it was very possible to marry as long as his mother was still living. She developed cancer, and Muse was her ever attentive caretaker until she succumbed to the disease. He was 38 at the time. Again, he found himself unable to tolerate loss in a mature and realistic manner. Muse reportedly constructed a shrine in her honor in the 43-room mansion she left behind, ritualistically placing one of her wigs on the head of a doll each night before going to bed. He boarded up the window to her room, allowing no light to enter. Free of his mother's restraints, he became fascinated by pornography, which sadomasochistic themes and embraced an emergent homosexuality, frequenting gay bars and enjoying dalliances with male army buddies. His cannibalistic fantasies resurfaced, and on one occasion he fashioned pieces of pork onto the shape of a dismembered penis and devoured it. It was in 2001. I'm sorry. It was in 2001 that Muse made up his mind to the last play of his lifelong fantasy of killing and eating an actual person. After Muse had posted an advertisement on the internet recruiting a young, well built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed, he heard from several applicants who met him at a hotel room and role played cannibalistic acts, but to his disappointment, no one had taken him literally. His luck changed when he stumbled across an ad placed by a 43-year-old engineer in Massachusetts named Burned Brands entitled Dinner or Your Dinner, offering the chance to eat me alive. When Muse enthusiastically invited him to a farmhouse he owned, Brands responded, I hope you find me tasty. The collective term for those erotic wishes to either eat or be eaten by another person is vorophilia, from the Latin vora, which means devour or swallow. The two men met, and after sex, Muse felt the desire to consume his new partner. Like the female praying mantis, which will sometimes feast upon the head of a male after copulation, gradually working its way through the rest of the carcass. For an anesthetic, he fed Brandes a half a bottle of schnapps blended with 20 sleeping pills. Note that this fact lowers the ranking for Muse on the gradations of evil scale, since a more psychopathic or sadistic individual would have disregarded or even relished the victim's pain. After the sedatives took effect, it was mutually agreed that Muse was sever his companion's penis and that he would fry it for the two of them to eat. I have to stop on that note. Wow. Is there anybody in here? Am I reading to the wind? Oh my god. Can you imagine? Hold on a second, buddy. Let me saw that off. Let me fry it up in some grease and we both can have some. Whoa. Happy Thanksgiving, Aquarius. I hope that you had a good day. I hope that you and your family are doing well. Hi, Melissa D. Okay, here we go. As captured on a profoundly disturbing home video, Muse first unsuccessfully attempted to bite off the appendage before removing it with a knife, amid a loud scream from his willing victim. Brand then tried to eat some of his own penis, but found it unappealingly chewy. Muse fried it in a pan with salt, pepper, garlic, and wine, but it proved too burnt for the consumption. So he fed it to his dog. At this point, Muse helped the victim into a bath where he could slowly bleed out. While Muse watched a Disney film, after trying to stand up, Brand collapsed and slipped into unconsciousness, at which time Muse dragged him to an upper level of the house. After a period of prayer to both God and the devil, Muse killed his new lover by stabbing him in the throat. He then suspended him from a meat hook, freezing 44 pounds of meat from the painstakingly dismembered corpse in his refrigerator. He spent 10 months savoring brands over the course of a variety of candlelit meals. Of the experience of devouring a piece of the victim back in the form of a rump steak prepared with potatoes and sprouts, Muse would later remark, "The first bite was, of course, very strange. It was a feeling I can't really describe. I'd spent over 40 years longing for it, dreaming about it, and now I was getting the feeling that I was actually achieving this perfect interconnection through his flesh. It tasted to him much like pork, an opinion often rendered by cannibals. It is intriguing to observe that in addition to providing Muse sexual gratification, the experience gave him the pleasure of merging with another person and having the victim's body become, quite literally, part of his own. The victim's skull was buried in the killer's garden. Muse came to the attention of authorities in December 2002 when he posted new advertisements in an effort to locate a second victim. He informed police that the stockpile of flesh in the refrigerator had been removed from a wild pig. 2 years later, expressing remorse for his heinous crime, he was convicted of manslaughter, but a 2006 retrial for murder led to life imprisonment. He has since become a strict vegetarian. As noted, Muse was not a torturer or a sadist. Moreover, no significant history of psychopathic behaviors or traits was noted at his trial. Instead, his crime appears to have been related to loneliness and an intense sensitivity to abandonment. So that's the only reason he killed. Just that right there. Related to loneliness and an intense sensitivity to abandonment. So all these people that are like trying to make up all these stories of the why, that could be the only reason. Yeah. From these feelings sprung forth a rich but terrifying world of fantasy and the egocentric need to eliminate the boundary between himself and a love object, even if it meant taking advantage of an apparently vulnerable, self loathing individual. Let me see how we're doing on time because I got to get to the gym. Okay, we're an hour and 19 minutes. So, so hot in here. I gotta put my shades on. What do y'all think about this book, y'all? I mean, we have a couple that aren't fans of it, obviously, but the rest of you that stayed and were able to listen to it, what do y'all think about it? Hey, typically unique. Happy Thanksgiving to you and Carlos and your family. I hope everybody is well. Haven't seen you in a while. Great bedtime story. Thank you. Great book. All right. I mean, it gives you the understanding of how individuals can simply kill based on the very most simplistic ways possible. That it doesn't always have to lead up to a 30-mile track of theories, but it could literally just lead up to this guy was lonely and his abandonment issues and thoughts of eating another human since childhood all cultivated in him doing what he did. So, whenever you start to think about other cases that you're going to hear about, it's always suggestive to ask yourself, okay, what category would this crime fall into? Would it be self-defense? Would it be due to any of the ones that I've mentioned? And I will go over the scale at the very end again, or from time to time, because there's a lot of people that didn't catch the first reading. So if you didn't, you might go check out the first live, and this kind of goes with the second one. So I need to put part two. That way, people can understand exactly how this is all going together. I hope you guys had a very awesome Thanksgiving. And I do want to put a disclaimer out there for people that are watching or people that potentially have are lurking. I'm not talking about Idaho 4 in detail in any variation. I might use it for example on this channel from here on out, but I'm not doing Idaho 4. So please do not come into my chat dropping bombs about Idaho 4 or about Brian's innocence or about any of that stuff because it's not relevant. So, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to learn new things if you're open to it. But please try not to just come in here and like drop a bomb about that because I could care less whether he's going to be walking free anytime soon. I mean, if you believe that, then I don't know what to tell you because it's not going to happen. He's going to trial. And if you believe otherwise, I mean, that's on you. You believe as you wish. But there's many people that have this understanding that they can tell me anything and their ferociousness of how they put it or whatever is going to change my mind one bit or going to aggravate me or anger me. I'm telling you, I could care less. I could care less. I could care less up to this point because we're not talking about that case. I'm talking about true crime, real true crime here. So if you don't want to learn about it, you don't want to hear about it, you don't want to hear about the authors, you don't care about people that are real investigators and real profilers and things of that nature, then don't come over here. Stay out of my chat. Keep your opinion to yourself. Nobody cares over here. Nobody's going to jump on and agree with you because we have a good chat over here. These people are smart and they have an understanding of trolls. So, with that being stated, I do welcome new people to come in here and try to listen to what is being presented because there's a lot of information in here that people could learn from. And knowledge is power. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your holiday weekend. Tomorrow is Black Friday, so y'all be safe out there. There are some crazy people on these Black Friday streets, no doubt. No doubt. So that's all I got to say about that. I ask you one time, can you dig it? Can you dig it? If you can't dig it, get yourself a bigger shovel. I'm going to play the rest of that song that I played on the intro. I hope y'all enjoy it. Have a great night.
The year is 1991. Birds and people are living